Part 2 of top 10 tips when guesstimating foods without the fat.
Boom, here we go. You guys ready?
Oh, yeah. Well, they already are. Says last presentation, we talked about tips 1 through 5. This one, we're diving in 6 through 10. I
Boom.
almost lost my tongue on that one.
That's all right. We got it.
So let's start with number 6. Reflect, learn, modify. Let's be real, like this is just a lifelong philosophy that's going to set you up for lifelong success.
Yep.
With
Never
anything.
stop learning.
Yep, for sure. So reflection allows for learning, modifying the plan, and or guesstimations for future experiences. And so what do we mean by this? Well, let's take a moment to think about expectations versus reality, because we all know that can be very different.
Yep.
I mean, come on, like we see this, we're like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna make this beautiful Ariel cake, and this is what it comes out to be, right? You're like, oh, it looks so easy. And you're like, oh shit, that was a lot harder.
That was a cake. I thought it was like a rug or something.
No, that's a cake.
Oh, all right.
My aunt used to make those.
Yeah, I thought it was like a little like.
No. And then you also have like this part of expectations versus reality, where all of these fast food places, they have these beautiful looking representations of their food, and then you get there and you're like, what the hell is this? Like, this looks nothing like what they said it was going to be, or what they showed it was going to be. But that doesn't mean that changes the calories.
But
I'll tell you that.
it also, like, in reality, there's easier to eat. Look, they're all like so much smaller, because if they were as big as they make them out to be, like there's no way you get your mouth around them. So they're doing you a favor.
Yeah, I'm like, how do they? Like, it really is. It's vastly different. But there is also this kind of expectation versus reality, where, for instance, maybe you planned ahead. You're like, oh, I'm gonna get this, like this size burrito. I'm gonna guesstimate this amount of calories, and then guess what? You get to the restaurant and like they serve you this. Either they serve you this and you didn't realize this, or you decided to change your mind and this is what you decide to order, right?
Yep. And sometimes that is the benefit of doing a little bit of research ahead of time, or looking on social media, or doing other things. Because there's been times where I've looked at the menu and read something, like, oh, like that seems good or responsible. And you see a picture of it, you're like, oh wow, that's definitely not what I would have thought, having read that. And so it's like sometimes it may not even be that you change your mind. It's just like, oh, like reading it sounds one way, and then seeing it is like, oh, that is very different.
Yeah. And so like when it comes to those types of things and reflecting, learning, and modifying, it's asking yourself, like, is there anything that you would have changed about the, like the way that you guesstimated? Was the dish, like when you got there, was it bigger? Was it smaller? Was it about like what you expected, right?
Yep.
Do you think like you were spot on, too high, too low, whatever?
Yeah. Would you look at pictures?
Yeah, exactly. And then, is there anything that you would change about it? So for instance, like maybe was the guesstimation process, it was like, oh my gosh, this is so much work. My brain just like had a brain fart and doesn't work anymore. So would you change like how you went about it? Would you change maybe the way that you responded and acted to it? So for instance, like if you guesstimated for a smaller burrito and you got the freaking arm length of a burrito, did you eat the whole thing? Did you eat a portion of it? And there is no like right or wrong with it, but it's just like, hey, ooh, this is more calories than I guesstimated for. Do I want to make that logical decision of, you know what, I'm okay with eating the whole thing, and that's cool. Or maybe you're like, hey, you know what, I'm just gonna eat a portion of it because like I only guesstimated for this amount. Once again, no right or wrong. It's just making a decision with it.
Yep, being in control. Because a lot of times what happens in the situation is people like to point the fingers like, oh, like I tried, but then the restaurant brought me out this behemoth. It's like, yeah, but you also didn't have to eat it. So every step of the way, like being aware, realize that, hey, look, like you're in control of the situation. You have your hands on the steering wheel, and decide like, all right, how do I want to move forward? Because the reality is like, nothing's ever going to go as planned. Life is always going to throw you a curveball. So it boils down to like, how are you going to react when those things happen?
Yep. And then even asking yourself, like, was it worth it? Like, was it actually worth the amount of calories that you ate? Was it worth the process that it took you to, to guesstimate, to measure and track, to whatever you did to experience the moment, the steps leading up to the moment, and then of course how you felt afterwards.
Yep. Right? And if it wasn't, then how would you adjust? Doesn't mean I'm never going to do it again. It's like, hey, maybe not ordering that food, or maybe the guesstimation process leading up to it can be changed so it's a little bit like easier, more enjoyable. What are the areas along the way that you can adjust to make the entire thing more enjoyable so you can keep doing it?
Yep. All right. Get creative in the kitchen.
Yep.
I touched upon this before, but
Yep.
like I love it. And first off, don't be afraid to fuck up. I
Yep.
mean, that's how you learn.
Yep. Or put
Okay.
things together that you wouldn't normally think to put together.
Oh
Where it's like, oh,
yeah.
like especially like when you start looking at things in regards like, all right, what's the nutrients in these? How can I get what I need? You may come up with some really weird stuff that actually tastes pretty good.
Yeah,
This is
exactly.
one of them. No.
Well, no, so this is like, come on, we love pizza. And so this is one
Oh,
of our like personal homemade pizzas. And I think with this, I think this is our brisket one. And so I did not cook this brisket. We probably got it at the grocery store. This one's been years. And we probably have the recipe for this pizza crust in there, but it's pretty good. But getting creative in the kitchen, it's freaking fun and engaging. And don't get me wrong, like there are certain things that I create and I'm like, oh, this is not so
but
good.
this is where it's like one of those things where it's like, oh, like some things that you put together, you may not expect. Like one of the pizza crusts that we do is like ricotta cheese, non-fat cheese, and egg
I
whites or
think
something
that's
like
this
that.
one.
And then you like, microwave a little bit, mix it up, spread it out, and you're like, what the heck is this? And look at someone blew their nose on the sheet. And then you bake it. Oh, it turns into bread. That's
Yeah,
so weird.
yeah,
And it's majority proteins. Like this is phenomenal.
yeah,
But when you look at the ingredients list or how you're gonna put it together, it's like there's no way this is gonna be delicious.
yeah.
Or depending on how deep you get into some of this stuff, like she does, cauliflower like oats, and you think like, oh, that is disgusting. But when you eat it, you can't even tell. And so that's where it's like, get creative, think outside the box, take a look at like, all right, what does my body need, or how do I want to put this together, and then build it versus like, all right, what's a traditional? Very someone's like, all right, like small step, have breakfast for dinner.
Mhm.
There you go. Think outside the box.
Yeah. But like one of the other ways that you can get creative in the kitchen is you can make something that you would normally eat out at a restaurant. And when you create it at home, it gives you a different perspective of like, oh, I'm going to eat a half-pound burger at a restaurant. Why don't I just make it at home? And then you can put the ingredients in yourself, and then you can experience like, oh, maybe I actually like it better at home. But it gives you that like size perspective on the thing that you're eating. Same thing, like maybe you make your own poke bowl at home. Maybe you make a bowl of spaghetti and you're like, okay, like what does a cup of spaghetti even look like? Like, when you go out to Macaroni Grill and they give you freaking, it's probably like 4 cups of spaghetti and some of these things, right? You're like, oh, that's quite a bit of servings. And then you can, as he was mentioning, change it into macro-friendly versions. And so you might even find that you prefer the macro-friendly versions because either maybe they taste better, you can eat them more often, they
Or you
serve
can
you
have a bigger
differently,
serving
you have
size.
a bigger serving.
Because sometimes with like a burger, it's like, all right, cool. Like you can make a half-pound burger at the house and keep it around 400 or 500 calories. So you go to a restaurant, it's like, all right, 1,000, twelve
Yep,
hundred. It's like, oh, I'd much rather have a burger at the house because
yep.
I can have a gigantic burger for half the calories. But that also helps to realize, like, all right, just because you can make a 500-calorie burger at the house, do not assume that when you go out,
Oh,
a
goodness
giant
gracious, no.
burger is 500 calories.
Nope, nope, definitely not. All right, increasing your precision.
Oh.
And this kind of goes hand in hand with regards to like what is your goal and your expectations and what are you looking to get out of this, right? But as with anything, the more that you practice, that helps you become more knowledgeable and aware of like what is happening. You can build different associations, but really reconditioning your eyeballs and playing that eyeball game that we first uh, we'll say encourage you to do on your phase 4 freedom journey. Because when you go out, like, hey, I will tell you right now, when we first went out to eat, I would bring the scale. And
Yeah.
even sometimes now, like, I'd like to bring the scale, and I'm not saying everything, and I'm not saying every single time. What I'm saying is I've brought the scale to a donut place because I'm like, gosh, I wonder like how heavy this donut is or whatever. And then I'm now like, okay, like they look like they have about this many calorie, or this is the amount of calories within it, and their donuts all tend to be about this. So I know that when I go to this place, then it holds about this many calories. Even like if you go to, for instance, like Krispy Kremes, like they don't have the weight of their donuts or whatnot. But if you could go and you could bring your scale and you could see like, all right, this is Krispy Kreme's average donut size. If I go to a mom and pop donut shop, like they're about Krispy Kreme's donut size, and it gives you that like association. Do you have to do that? No. I like to do it because it gives me more information.
It also helps you order in the future, especially for something
Yes.
like this. Like if you think barbecue, it's like, oh, because at least for me, when I first started to go, it's like, oh, like how much is a good amount of like brisket or turkey? I don't know. Like it doesn't seem like is a quarter pound, half pound, a full pound, like is that a lot? When you talk about it, it's like, oh, like a pound of meat seems like a lot, or even like a quarter pound seems like it could be a decent amount. When you go to most like barbecue places, if you've done it enough times, you're always like, oh, a quarter pound of brisket is probably like a single slice of brisket. So it's like, oh, well, then I do one slices, two slices, how's this gonna look? So one, it helps you have an association with the calories that you're about to consume. But then also, like when you're like, all right, how much do I want to eat or what do I want to look like on my plate? If you want a full plate, maybe brisket's not the way to go because you realize, all right, I could have a slice and that's about it. But it helps you train your eye to where it's like, all right, like this is about how much I would like to eat and build your plate appropriately.
Yeah. But like also getting, going back to the getting creative in the kitchen, start to introduce foods that maybe you want to eat, but you don't eat often. And it will allow you to start to build these associations. Like he mentioned, like with brisket, if you don't eat it often, like, all right, hey, go to a barbecue spot. I mean, the nice part about the barbecue spots is they weigh your meat. So you know the amount of meat or that you are getting.
Yep.
But even for me, if we have leftovers, I really like to transform them into something. And so then what happens is I bring these leftovers home. I can use the scale to approximate different things. And then it gives me this whole picture of serving sizes and calories and whatnot.
Yep.
Right. All right. Just ask.
Oh,
People are so afraid to
because
ask.
sometimes it's like, well, how do I know? It's like, well, you have to ask. They want to figure it out on their own, or they're just like, oh, maybe I'll just guess, or who knows? Maybe just like being in the area, I'll just automatically absorb the information. Not going to happen.
Yeah, so like just ask. The worst thing that they can say is no. And what we mean by this is, like ask the restaurant if they have nutrition facts. Some do, some don't. Some advertise it, some do not.
And
I
some will even say, oh, I'll go back to the kitchen and ask. Or like,
yeah,
the servers may not know. I'm not saying that you have to like hold anyone to it, but like sometimes like, oh, I have no idea. Or, that's a great question. Let me go find out. And then it's like, oh, like I talked to our pastry chef. Our cake slices are about this big. It's like,
yep.
oh, fantastic.
But it just gives you further information to help in many different scenarios for you to either pre-plan and know what you're getting into, for you to utilize it for a different entry, like so many different things. But yeah, like Trulux, you can call and be like, oh, about how many ounces are your cake slices? Because they typically will know. And then because they don't have nutrition facts, you're like, all right, this cake is this many ounces. Let me put in, I'm probably going to eat half the cake. So I'm going to eat this many ounces of this kind of cake and find a cake that has nutrition facts.
Yep.
Boom. All right. Last one.
Oh,
Try something new.
yeah. Don't be scared.
Don't be scared because if you want to experience something different, you have to do something different,
Yep.
right? And so trying new things, like we were just saying, eat something that you don't normally eat. Like don't be afraid. See how you respond. Reflect. Is that something I would do again?
It doesn't have to be like an exotic ingredient or anything
No.
like that, but like especially when you're like on this process or when people think, oh, I got to eat healthier, I'm making change. There's things that they potentially eliminate. So it's like, all right, like what's something that you wouldn't normally eat if you were thinking about like making healthy change, and then how can you incorporate it into your diet, or at least give it a try and take a guess like, all right, how many calories is this? How can I work it into my plan? So when you first start, a lot of times people get very simple. And the more you do, it's like, all right, try something new, think outside the box. What's something that maybe you've wanted for a while and haven't had, or you've always wanted to, but just couldn't figure out how to do it?
Yep.
Try it.
Yeah. Give yourself the permission to just do it. Because like with any type of fear, the only way to get over it is to just address it straight on,
Yep.
right? But do your best to be honest while managing and setting realistic expectations in this entire process in anything in life, right? And so, in conclusion, planning ahead while making sure to reflect, learn, and modify for future experiences. Use that for every part of your life. And then don't be afraid to ask or try new things. And of course, practice the skill and identify the way of guesstimating and level of precision that makes sense for you, your life, and your goals. But if you have any questions, be sure to submit a burning question or apply for a breakthrough session.